Hi everyone, it's Jo Gifford here from the Unbound press team. Our lovely Nicola is away at the moment on holiday, so I'm just jumping in to hold the mic and introduce you to this week's podcast episode, which is all about what's really stopping you from bringing your book together. Now, this episode is one that we are re-airing, and it's one that is just so useful. So if you have heard this before, I recommend you give it a re-listen with fresh ears. And if you haven't, this is definitely one that you're going to want to spend time listening to. This is our wonderful founder, Nicola, delving into what is really stopping you from bringing your book together. And as someone who's put together 2 book projects over the last few years, there have been so many things that have come up that might have slowed me down or come up as obstacles, from self-doubt to overwhelm to time constraints. And there can be so many things that prevent us from sharing our magic with the world. So introducing, or should I say reintroducing, what's really stopping you from bringing your book together. Take it away, Nicola.
Hello and welcome to the Unbound Writers Club, and the first one of a new year, which is always exciting. So if you are listening to this around the date that it is released, how are you feeling as we are landing here together in 2023? As I'm recording this, we're in the first week of January, and just really gently feeling my way into the year, back into work after the festive break. We've just had our first couple of calls for this year, for this season in the Unbound Writing Mastermind, some intention setting calls, and that theme of going gently is, it feels very present for many of us. And I was wondering what to talk about in this first episode of the year in the Unbound Writers Club. I asked the question over in my Facebook group, the Facebook group we have for anyone who has invested in some kind of Unbound writing offer. So our mastermind members are in there, our Unbound Press authors, and like if you've done the Unbound Writing Challenge or any of my other programs or workshops, then you get to come and join us over in the Unbound Writers Club Facebook group. And I asked the question earlier in the week, what do you want to know about writing your book? What are your burning questions? And there are like common questions that come up over and over again. And the one I wanted to talk about today, which might feel a bit strange because we're at the beginning of a year, but it's about getting past that point of like you've been writing, maybe you've got a first draft, maybe it doesn't even feel like a first draft yet, but how do you bring everything together? So like I said, that might feel a bit weird for me to be talking about at the beginning of the year, although you could be listening to this at any time, of course. But this is something that can really keep us stuck and can even stop you from starting to write your books. It's like it might feel so overwhelming, the idea of, okay, I can write, but then how on earth am I going to bring it together into some kind of coherent form? And I also know that if you're listening to this, yes, you may be in that stage of thinking about writing a book, but you could be like in the process already. You may even be, quite deep into your book writing journey. And I am really interested in this idea, or in the fact that so many of us can struggle with the idea of bringing a book together, like making it feel coherent, or so it feels coherent for us. And so many of the writers that I speak to are at this stage where they've begun writing. And, obviously the invitation with the Unbound writing approach is to write in a, really free way. You're showing up at the page or at your laptop and just allowing whatever wants to come through. Like that is the invitation, which is amazing. But as one person said in the Unbound Writers Club Facebook group, it can feel like chaos, and it can. And that's a really powerful place to be. Like, to allow it to actually feel like that means that, the truest essence of what wants to come through. Well, this is my belief. When we allow ourselves to be in the mess, in the chaos, and just really be in that place of receptivity, like what wants to come, what wants to be expressed through me, it's really powerful. And it can feel chaotic. So many of us get to this place where it's like, I've got all of this writing, and maybe it's in a notebook, maybe it's on your laptop, maybe it's in one document, maybe it's in lots. How on earth do I bring it together? And the fact is, or my belief is, like, deep down, how to bring your book together. Only you can know how to bring your book together. And I am going to give you some tips and some guidance on how to approach that. But I know from personal experience, when I get to this point with a book, it's not so much kind of the practicality of bringing it together. It's something within me that can stop me from like moving through and actually allowing myself to bring my book into a coherent form. Because for so many of us, we carry these fears and doubts around our worthiness, and whether what we have to express, what we have to share, is whether it has value. And I know, from my experience of writing my first book, Heal Your Inner Good Girl in particular, I mean, I was writing about the idea of the inner good girl, this part of us that wants to fit in, please others, and get it right. There's something here about we want to get it right. And like, this can be the case with like any question that comes up about the book writing process or anything. It's like, but what's the right way to do it? And the truth is, I don't know what's the right way to bring your book together. I don't know what is the right way to tell your story or share your experience, to share your wisdom. Only you know that. And the truth is, there isn't a right way. Like, there is no one right way to do it. And the truth is, it may be the first time you've written a book, but you know how to do this. You know how to tell a story. You know how to share an insight. You know how to hold space for somebody to have an experience, because you do this all the time in one way or another. You do it if you work with clients, you do it with your clients, you do it if you're sharing on social media, you do it if you write blog posts, if you write emails, you do it if you like teach classes or workshops, you do it with your family, you do it with your friends. Like, we are continually doing this, but there is something about a book that just sends us up into our heads. And I know it is a bigger piece of work than most of the projects that we work on. I understand that. But there is something here about trusting ourselves and like tapping into the knowing of like this information, this inspiration, this activation has been flowing through me. I felt the call to write a book. I showed up. I've allowed what wants to come. There is some kind of form here. It's here already. And I get to play with that now. And there is no one right way. Like, I can trust myself to do this. And I can trust that when I do it, it will be good enough. It will be more than good enough. There's no way it couldn't be. Yeah. Because you have responded to the call. And you might be listening to this being like, but just tell me what to do, Nick. Or you don't understand, like, what I have is such a mess. And the thing is, you don't have to do this on your own either. But I really want you to pay attention to what is coming up around this. if you are at this stage with your book where you have lots of writing and you have been feeling stuck or resistant around bringing it together, what is really going on? Is it just because practically you don't feel you know how to do that? And I'm sure on one level it is that, but what is underneath that? Because like I said, going back to when I was writing my first book, Heal Your Inner Good Girl, when I was coming towards the end of that, I was just finding myself like in this place. I was like feeling paralyzed. Like I got to a point, I had, different chapters and I knew it was pretty close to completion, but something was stopping me. It's like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about this. And I was in this place of questioning. And it nearly stopped me from actually getting to a point of being able to release it. And it was only when I was having a conversation, I was telling myself, I was on a call with my accountability buddy, Jess, and I was like, oh, well, I think I just have this like issues around completion, which is probably true. Might be true for a lot of us. But actually underneath that, when I was having a conversation later on with Mr. H, my husband, about it, and he was like, but this is what you're writing about in the book though, isn't it? Like you're in a good girl. And I'd written about an experience at school when I'd handed in a piece of work and the teacher had like said in front of the whole class that it was absolute rubbish. And I'd felt that it was really good. And she just stopped everyone and said, Nicola's handed, this is why we don't rush our work, because Nicola's handed in this piece of work and it's absolute rubbish. And in that moment, I felt such a sense of shame and shock. And that is part of what was stopping me from moving forwards and actually bringing that book to the point of completion, like really bringing it all together. And not even so much that, because I had got it to a point where it felt pretty coherent, but I was telling myself that it wasn't enough. So I just want you to be in that place of curiosity. Like when you're asking the question, how do I bring this together? I don't feel like I can do it. It feels like too much. It feels overwhelming. It feels too confusing. Is there anything underneath that? And it can be a really helpful thing to journal on, or, to take yourself for a walk and just go, like, what is really going on here? Because like I said, yes, the practical elements of this are really important. And I am going to share some guidance around that. But very often there's something else going on. And I don't want you to be stuck in that place. I don't want you to be stuck in that place where your book is just floating around and it doesn't, it's not coming into like fully into form. My sense is that often your book is much, much closer to being fully formed than you allow yourself to believe. So there is something in just reminding yourself that there's a reason why I've been doing this. It's not just something I thought, oh yeah, I might write a book. Like if you are listening to this, like it is a calling for you to write your book. So there's no way that you wouldn't be able to bring it together. And maybe you get some support with that. Like there are always, there's always the option to get somebody else's eyes on your book, like whatever stage it's at, and ask for support, whether that's a friend, whether it's an editor that you work with. And if you need any referrals for editors, like we have an amazing team at the Unbound Press, who, are also available to work on a freelance basis. So I can always make recommendations, or somebody else who's writing a book, like someone else in the Unbound writing community. Maybe you can do a swap where you read each other's writing and kind of give each other some guidance on bringing it together. So that's definitely one way to approach it. But there is a big piece here around trusting yourself and letting yourself know, reminding yourself, like my words have value. What I have to offer has immense value. I wouldn't be doing this otherwise. Yeah. And your book is needed out in the world. Like, your book is needed out in the world. And a huge part of the Unbound writing approach is, to trust the timing, and also to, allow yourself to go through the process of bringing your book together and releasing it, allowing it to make contact with the people that it's meant to make contact with. So if you are at a point right now, and this can be any point in the journey where you're just feeling, oh, I'm not sure, this is feeling a bit chaotic, it feels a bit all over the place, I just want to have a sense of like where I am with my book so I can know how to move forwards with it. And this may be quite a way into the process. It might be quite early on. Maybe you've been like writing for a few weeks, a few months, and it's like, I want to know where I am. What I recommend is, if you've been handwriting up until now, like, this is a really great point to start typing up what you have. Okay. And what I would recommend is for like each section that you've been writing. So, maybe you're writing about certain themes, or like on particular days, you're just coming to your journal and just saying what wants to come through. Like, for each day that you have or each theme that you have, like typing that, like starting that on a different page in your document, Word or Pages, whatever you use. Because once you've typed it up, I'm going to recommend that you actually print out that document. And obviously, if you've already been typing it, I recommend like make sure that your different sections are starting on different pages so that when you type it out, you can start and make sure the pages are numbered. Because what I'm going to invite you to do is, once you've got it typed out, is to get those pages, just notice like the themes on each page, on each section. And you might want to just write 1 or 2 words at the top of each page, which kind of encapsulate what you're writing about. And then you can actually start playing around with those pages. So you might want to just kind of make yourself some space and get all those pages out on the floor. And you can do this with the actual pages, or you could like use Post-its for this and just write, like I said, a couple of words or a phrase about what each section is, and start playing around with like the order and the structure of your book. But there's something about having a physical representation of it, which is going to help you to bring it into form and help you to have a clearer sense of what you've got, and also maybe anything that still needs to come, anything that feels like it's missing. And really, in order to bring it into form, and I've spoken about this before, I'm going to put a link to another episode here where we were talking about like what to do once you feel like you have your first draft. I'll put the link in the show notes to that. You really, one way to approach bringing your book together, and something I recommend, is just thinking about the journey that you're taking your reader on. So it doesn't have to be like this really linear journey, but, where will your reader be at the beginning? Why are they coming to your book? What information is going to be helpful to them? Or which one of your stories is going to be helpful to them at the beginning of their journey? And when I say which one of your stories or ones of your stories, like this is the place at the beginning of your book, like all the way through, but like certainly at the beginning, you want to be letting your reader know that you get them, like that maybe you've had shared experiences. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing you're going to be sharing at the beginning. And then you're going to be taking them on this journey. So there may be different steps or stages that you're taking them through. In my second book, Unbound, like the beginning of the book was, talking about like what is the unbound self, and my experience of not feeling that way, not feeling unbound, and, how I started on this journey of walking the unbound path. So a lot of it at the beginning of the book was like talking a little bit about my story, and also what my reader may have been experiencing and noticing if they were in this place of maybe they've been pushing down their unbound self and were ready to kind of allow that part of them now, that full expression of them to come through. And then I moved on to talking about the 5 principles of living unbound. Now, those 5 principles, you know, you may have heard me talk about this before. I didn't have a plan for Unbound when I started writing it. I didn't go, okay, I'm going to start, you know, with this introductory section, and then I'm going to move into like 5 principles, or I didn't even think about, you know, I didn't even know there were going to be any particular principles of living unbound. It was only going through the process of, you know, typing up what I had and noticing the themes that were coming through that I could see, oh, okay, there are some principles here. There are some, you know, different focuses, different themes that I can form into like sections of the book, into chapters of the book. And again, you may have heard me say before, like I felt I was writing about 5 different books when I was writing Unbound because it didn't seem to fit together. But that's because there were these different principles that were wanting to come through. And then when I could see they were all part of like the greater whole, it's like, okay, that makes sense. And then I moved on to talk about some of the challenges of living in an unbound way. And then at the end, I give the reader some practices, high potency practices to support them on their onward journey. So this was the reader journey for Unbound. At the beginning, I'm like letting the reader know they've landed in the right place, that I get them, that I've been there, like inviting them to come on the journey. Then we move into the principles of living unbound. And again, I'm sharing elements of my story and, you know, of the people that I've worked with. Then I'm acknowledging the challenges because, you know, I don't want to make it all sound like easy and rosy. It's like, let's talk about the challenges. Let's acknowledge those. And then at the end, I'm giving them some practices, like some ways that they can start to embody being their unbound self. So it's quite a simple framework. The process of writing Unbound did not feel simple, and it did feel chaotic a lot of the time. But the invitation here is like, once you've gone out and you've allowed what wants to come through, like you've expanded out in your writing, when you come to this point and you type it up and you print it out, how can you bring that essence of simplicity through? How can you make this really easy for yourself and your reader? And I think that idea of the reader journey is a really powerful way to do that. Like, where do different sections of your book sit? Where do they fit? What does your reader need to hear at the beginning? What's going to be helpful for them as they start on the journey and begin to get into the journey? What's going to support them as they move forwards? What do you want to give them as they finish the book and start to implement and embody what you've shared? So that's a way to approach it. I do believe that having some kind of physical representation of your book, whether it's like say printing the pages out or doing that on Post-it notes, can help you to play around with the order. But also like knowing, like I said at the beginning, there is no one right way. And once you have been through this process of bringing it together for the first time and you have an idea of what it's going to look like, that's the point where maybe you get somebody else to read through. That can be a really powerful point to do it. Or certainly you just have a read through at that point and just go, okay, well, how is this flowing? Is there anything that feels like it needs to be expanded on? Is there anything that's like missing completely? Is there another section or another chapter that I feel like I want to write? And again, trusting that. I wouldn't get into like editing in a really detailed sense at this stage at all. Like obviously if you notice something when you're typing it up, you know, fine, you can if you notice a typo in your journal, when you're typing it, obviously you're going to correct that. But, you don't worry about like the grammar and the spelling too much at this stage, because you will be going back through your book a number of times, believe me, as you move through the process. But really, it is about anchoring into trust. And I know that might feel irritating to hear. Like, not everything is a mindset issue. I get that. But I think there definitely is an element of that here, because we see books as these things that have to be done in this like certain particular proper way. And it's like, no, you get to do it in your own way. And you can get support and guidance and advice around that. But you can begin to bring your book into form. What is it that's really stopping you? What is underneath it all? And how could you allow this to be really easy and pleasurable? Bringing pleasure into your writing is a key part of the Unbound writing approach as well. So maybe you take yourself off for a day or a weekend, like to go through this process and like revisit everything that you've written, type it up, read through, play around with the order. How would it be to allow that process to be really pleasurable? But you know how to do this. Yes, it's most likely a longer piece of work, piece of writing than you're used to working with, but it's a series of shorter pieces of writing. So that is the key, like to bring it into those shorter pieces of writing so that you can play around with the structure and the order that it wants to take. And let me know how you get on and what comes up for you as you listen to this episode. Like I said, it's a bit topsy-turvy to start the year. We're talking about like completing your book. I mean, really, this is a stage that you get to later on in your book writing journey, but it's not the end of the process, because it's likely you'll be doing more writing afterwards, like of pieces that you want to bring in, pieces you want to expand on. But it is something that can keep us stuck, and it can stop us from even getting started. So, it keeps coming up, and I wanted to speak to it. Like, your words have value. They really do. All right, my love. Well, I will be back very soon with another episode of the Unbound Writers Club. In the meantime, I always love to hear from you. If any questions or insights or awarenesses bubble up from this episode, the best place to find me is on Instagram. I'm at Nicola Humber. Just pop me a DM. I would love to hear from you. And I will be back with you again very soon. Lots of love.